Ever since I was a child, I knew that our family was fraught with secrets and betrayals. My father always had a way of twisting events to suit his narrative, and I, unfortunately, became the scapegoat for everything that went wrong. I remember the day I first heard him declare, with cold conviction, that I was responsible for my mother's death. It was a moment seared into my memory, a turning point that set the course for the rest of my life. I was 8 years old, and I couldn't comprehend how a father's love could turn into such a bitter accusation. But as I grew older, the truth became undeniable. My father favored my sister Emily in every possible way, leaving me to shoulder the blame for tragedies that weren't my fault. My childhood was a series of silent sufferings and unspoken resentments. While Emily was showered with affection and praise, I was left to fend for myself, misunderstood and ostracized in a household where my every mistake was magnified. The night Mom died, a night forever haunted by the sound of my father's harsh words, marked the beginning of my isolation. I was told that her death was a consequence of my inattention, a failure to protect her, though I was barely a teenager at the time. Every subsequent birthday, every family gathering was a reminder of that fateful night and the way it had fractured our family forever. In the years that followed, I found solace in the things I could control. I threw myself into work and became fiercely independent, vowing never to be defined by someone else's bitterness. When Dad fell sick, an ironic twist of fate given his constant criticisms, I was the only one who stepped up. Despite the deep-seated resentment I harbored, I couldn't abandon the man who had been both my tormentor and my only remaining family. Caring for him was a bitter duty, one that I performed with stoic determination and an unspoken promise to myself. If I ever had the chance, I would make sure he faced the consequences of his cruelty. Years passed, and I managed to build a life that was entirely my own. I found love, stability, and a semblance of happiness in the midst of the lingering shadows of my past. My wedding day was meant to be a celebration of new beginnings, a moment when I could finally leave behind the pain and betrayals of my youth. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As I stood at the altar, ready to pledge my life to someone who truly loved me, my father's insistence on inviting Emily sent shockwaves through my carefully constructed world. I had always known that Emily and I were not alike. While I had fought to rise above the bitterness of our childhood, she had reveled in it, using every opportunity to stoke the flames of resentment that simmered beneath our fractured relationship. The wedding was a day of contradictions. The joy of the occasion was marred by the presence of my sister, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had defined so much of my life. I tried to put on a brave face, exchanging pleasantries and small talk with those around me, but inside, I was seething with the knowledge that I had been forced to confront the person who had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. As the reception began, I found myself alone in a quiet corner of the venue, contemplating the years of silent suffering and the price I had paid for loyalty and love. It was then that the moment of reckoning arrived. Emily approached me, her eyes glistening with a mixture of regret and defiance. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if those two words could erase decades of accumulated pain. I looked at her, my heart pounding with anger and sorrow, and told her coldly that forgiveness was not an option. Every apology was just another attempt to rewrite the past, to erase the scars that had defined my life. I made it clear that I would not allow her empty remorse to undo the betrayal that had been the very foundation of our relationship. That conversation was the catalyst for what would become my quest for retribution. In the months that followed, I meticulously planned a way to ensure that the scales of justice were finely balanced. I began by digging into my father's past, uncovering secrets that he had carefully hidden away. Secrets that painted a picture of a man driven by selfishness and cruelty. I discovered that the same man who had blamed me for a tragedy was also involved in shady business dealings, ones that had ruined the lives of many innocent people. I realized that my quest for revenge was not just about settling a personal score, it was about righting the wrongs that had plagued our family for so long. I wanted to expose my father for the fraud that he was, to make him pay for the years of manipulation and cruelty. And so, armed with irrefutable evidence, I approached the authorities, knowing there was no turning back. The legal battle that ensued was as grueling as it was emotionally draining. My father, ever the manipulator, tried to twist the narrative once again, painting me as an unstable, resentful child who had finally lost his temper. But the truth was on my side. The evidence was undeniable. and soon the story of his misdeeds spread like wildfire. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives began to question the man they had once admired. The downfall of the man who had once been the patriarch of our family was swift and merciless. As the legal proceedings reached their climax, the court delivered a verdict that left my father financially ruined and publicly disgraced. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of liberation, a release from the weight of guilt and sorrow that had haunted me for so long. Yet the victory was bittersweet. Emily, my so-called sister, had played her part in my father's rise and my eventual fall. I had never truly forgiven her, and I never would. The satisfaction of seeing my father brought to his knees was incomplete until I saw the ruins spread to every corner of the toxic legacy he had built. I made it my mission to ensure that those who had suffered because of him received some measure of restitution. I reached out to the victims, helping them rebuild their lives, and in doing so, I began to heal the wounds that had festered for decades. My journey was far from over. As I rebuilt my life, I found myself constantly reminded of the betrayals of my past. I had learned the hard way that forgiveness was a luxury I could not afford, not when the scars were so deep and the wrongs so profound. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw not just the face of a survivor, but the determined gaze of someone who had fought against injustice and come out stronger on the other side. The final chapter of this saga unfolded on a quiet afternoon in the wake of the trial. I was at home, reflecting on the series of events that had brought me to this moment when a knock on the door startled me. It was an old family friend, someone who had witnessed the unraveling of my father's empire and had always admired my resilience. He handed me an envelope with no return address and an air of mystery that I couldn't ignore. Inside, I found a collection of letters and photographs, evidence that not only confirmed my father's guilt in his business dealings, but also hinted at even darker secrets that had been buried for years. Among the documents was a letter addressed to me, written by a woman whose identity had been concealed by the passage of time. The letter spoke of love, loss, and a promise to one day set things right. It revealed that my mother had been entangled in a web of deceit long before her untimely death, and that my father had been complicit in schemes that endangered not only our family but countless others. The letter concluded with a haunting declaration: "You deserve the truth, and you deserve to reclaim the life that was stolen from you." Those words resonated within me, igniting a fire that propelled me to seek out every last piece of the puzzle. With renewed determination, I embarked on a mission to uncover the full extent of my father's misdeeds. I revisited old acquaintances, combed through dusty archives, and even traveled to distant cities where whispers of his corruption lingered in dark corners. Every discovery was like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle snapping into place, a narrative of greed, manipulation, and betrayal that spanned decades. With every piece of evidence I uncovered, my resolve hardened further. I would not let my father's legacy continue to poison the lives of those who had trusted him. The investigation was a solitary endeavor, punctuated by long nights of intense isolation and brief moments of hope. I often found myself alone in the dark, poring over documents by the dim light of a single lamp, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Even in those moments of solitude, I sensed a purpose that pushed me onward, a conviction that every sacrifice was a step toward the redemption that awaited me. I had become an agent of retribution, a force determined to dismantle a system built on lies and cruelty. In time, the full extent of my father's crimes became impossible to ignore. I presented my findings to a consortium of investigative journalists who had long suspected his underhanded dealings. Their reports, interlaced with my own evidence, painted a picture so damning that even his most ardent supporters could no longer turn a blind eye. The press became a powerful ally, broadcasting the truth to a world that had been kept in the dark for too long. It was a moment of vindication, a clear message that those who wield power without accountability would eventually be brought down. I watched as the fallout from my father's exposure rippled through every facet of his life. He lost his empire, his reputation, and, most painfully, his influence over those he once controlled. While the legal repercussions were severe, the personal satisfaction I derived from witnessing his downfall was unparalleled. I had reclaimed a part of my identity that had been eroded by years of abuse and manipulation. I had taken back the narrative of my life, transforming my pain into a weapon against injustice. Even as I celebrated this hard-won victory, I could not escape the bitter truth that my relationship with Emily was irrevocably broken. She had been complicit in the web of deceit that had marred our family, and despite her occasional expressions of remorse, I could not find it in my heart to forgive her. Our encounters were marked by a tense, unspoken war, a reminder that no amount of reconciliation could erase the years of betrayal. I knew then that I would never see her as a true family member, but only as a living reminder of a past I had fought relentlessly to overcome. Months after the trial concluded, I began to rebuild the shards of my life with deliberate care. Each morning, as I awoke in the modest apartment I now called home, I recalled the harsh lessons of my past, the cold indifference in my father's eyes, the hollow apologies from Emily, and the relentless accusations that had haunted my youth. In those early days of recovery, I discovered solace in simple routines: a hot cup of coffee at dawn, long walks through quiet city streets, and late nights spent poring over old documents and faded photographs that chronicled the legacy of deceit I was determined to dismantle. One crisp afternoon, while I was huddled in a cramped coffee shop reviewing records and notes, I encountered a man named Harold. Harold had once been an associate of my father during his early business ventures and possessed details that only someone on the inside could know. In a low, cautious tone, he recounted meetings held in dim back rooms, secret handshakes, and whispered deals that had shattered lives and built fortunes on betrayal. His accounts of hidden transactions and morally bankrupt decisions confirmed everything I had suspected, and more. Every word he spoke lit a fuse within me, stoking the flames of my resolve to see justice done. Over the following weeks, Harold became an unlikely mentor, guiding me through a labyrinth of financial records, confidential emails, and archived documents. Together, we painstakingly uncovered an intricate network linking my father to a host of corrupt individuals. Each new revelation served as both evidence of his misdeeds and a reminder of the ruin his actions had left in their wake. With every piece of the puzzle that fell into place, I grew more determined. My fight had evolved beyond personal vendetta. It was now a crusade to expose a system of exploitation and to restore dignity to those who had suffered. At the same time, the chasm between Emily and me only deepened. Our encounters were brief and strained, a clash of bitter memories and wounded pride. After a particularly tense family gathering, she once approached me in a quiet corridor, her eyes glistening with tears that betrayed her feigned remorse. "I never meant for you to carry all this pain," she murmured. But I could not accept her apologies, for they rang hollow against the echo of betrayal that had defined our relationship. I walked away from that encounter with a heavy heart, realizing that the gulf between us was insurmountable. I resolved then that forgiveness was a luxury I could no longer afford. Amidst my personal struggles, an unexpected opportunity arose. I was invited to speak at a local community event aimed at exposing corruption and inspiring change. Initially, I hesitated. Was I ready to reopen old wounds in front of an audience? But the prospect of sharing my story, of unburdening my soul, and offering hope to others who had suffered similar betrayals proved irresistible. On the day of the event, I stood before a modest but attentive crowd in a small auditorium. My voice wavered at first as I recounted the dark chapters of my family's history and the relentless pursuit of justice that had followed. As I continued, the room grew silent, and I saw in the faces before me not pity, but understanding and hope. In that moment, I realized that my pain had a purpose beyond my own suffering. After the event, I received messages from people whose lives had been impacted by my father's schemes, small business owners who had lost everything, community leaders betrayed by those they once trusted, and even strangers whose hearts had been touched by my words. Their gratitude and shared sorrow emboldened me, affirming that I was no longer alone in this fight. I began to see my struggle as part of a larger battle against corruption, a cause worth every sacrifice. With that newfound purpose, I decided to channel my experiences into something lasting. I founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to offering legal and financial support to victims of corporate malfeasance. In the early days, I often worked late into the night, driven by the conviction that every small victory could help rebuild shattered lives. Volunteers soon joined the cause, and what began as a personal mission evolved into a movement against injustice. Together, we organized town hall meetings, community workshops, and public forums where citizens could demand accountability from those in power. Each success, however modest, felt like a step away from the dark legacy that had defined my early life. Even as my nonprofit grew and my new life took shape, the ghosts of my past were never far behind. There were nights when the silence of my apartment was broken only by the echo of painful memories, the gentle smile of my mother, the harsh voice of a father who had never shown compassion, and the constant reminder of a sister whose betrayal had altered the course of my life. In one such restless night, I received a call from a determined lawyer who had been quietly investigating the inconsistencies in the official account of my mother's death. With a reputation for exposing buried truths, she hinted that my father might have manipulated the narrative of that fateful night. The revelation sent chills down my spine and reignited my determination to unearth every hidden detail. In the months that followed, I worked closely with this lawyer, combing through case files, interviewing long-forgotten witnesses, and painstakingly reconstructing the timeline of events. Every new fact was a blow against the carefully constructed lies that had haunted my family for decades. I discovered that my father had not only exploited my vulnerability, but had also manipulated the circumstances surrounding my mother's death to shield his own misdeeds. The more I learned, the clearer it became that my entire life had been built on a foundation of deception and betrayal. Fueled by a mix of anger and sorrow, I resolved that I would confront him one final time. That confrontation came on a crisp morning in a nondescript hotel room, chosen as neutral ground for what would be the culmination of years of suppressed rage. Facing my father, I laid out the evidence of his corruption and deceit, speaking in a tone that was as measured as it was unyielding. His eyes, once so full of condescension, now flickered with a desperate mix of indignation and feigned remorse. I told him that his reign of deception was over, that the truth would no longer be buried under his web of lies. Walking out of that room, I felt a liberation tempered by the knowledge that revenge, though necessary, would always come at a steep personal cost. Soon after our confrontation, the media caught wind of the story. What had once been a carefully hidden secret was now the subject of a public spectacle. My father's carefully cultivated image crumbled under the relentless barrage of investigative reports and court proceedings. As he faced indictment for multiple counts of fraud and obstruction of justice, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. It was a vindication of everything I had endured, a confirmation that the years of abuse and betrayal were finally yielding justice. But even as my father's empire collapsed, the personal cost of my pursuit of truth remained. The rift with Emily widened into an irreparable chasm. Every encounter with her was a raw reminder of a sister who had chosen betrayal over loyalty. I realized, with a heavy heart, that reconciliation was impossible. Forgiveness, I concluded, would be nothing more than a betrayal of myself. I vowed then that I would never allow her presence to diminish the strength I had forged from the fires of my past. In the aftermath of these tumultuous events, I devoted myself fully to my nonprofit and to the work of empowering those who had been wronged. I poured my energy into community initiatives, legal aid workshops, and public speaking events. Each effort a step toward healing not only my own wounds, but those of an entire community scarred by corruption. I also began writing a memoir, a raw, unfiltered account of my journey from victimhood to vindication. Every painful memory, every bitter betrayal, and every hard-won victory found its place on those pages, not as an invitation for pity, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As I penned the final chapters of my memoir, I was forced to confront memories I had long tried to bury: the gentle laughter of my mother, the cold cruelty of my father's accusations, and the relentless betrayal by the one person I had once called sister. Yet with each word I wrote, I reclaimed a piece of my identity. I began to understand that my story was not solely about revenge. It was about the relentless pursuit of truth and the unyielding determination to forge a better future from the ruins of my past. Today, when I stand before audiences at community events or listen to messages of gratitude from people whose lives have been touched by my work, I feel a bittersweet sense of triumph. I know that the scars of betrayal will never fully fade, but they have become symbols of my strength, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is a power within us that can transform pain into purpose. I have learned that forgiveness is not always the answer. Sometimes, the only true justice is to hold those who wronged you accountable for every misdeed. I share my story not to glorify revenge, but to affirm that truth, however painful, is a beacon that can guide us out of the shadows. Every step of my journey, from the day my father blamed me for Mom's death, through the isolation of my youth, to the triumphant exposure of his crimes, has been a battle fought in the name of justice. I have emerged not as a broken soul, but as a warrior who has transformed betrayal into a force for change. Even now, as I continue to lead my nonprofit and to support others in their battles against corruption, I am reminded that my past will always be a part of me. Yet, I refuse to let it define my future. I have chosen to honor my mother's memory and to safeguard the dignity of all those who were harmed by my father's deceit. I will never forgive the sister who betrayed me, nor will I ever allow my father's legacy to overshadow the truth. Instead, I have dedicated my life to ensuring that the cycle of abuse is broken once and for all. I stand here today, scarred but unbowed, with a heart that beats not with bitterness, but with a fierce determination to create a legacy of integrity and truth. My journey is a testament to the idea that even when the people we love betray us, we can rise above the pain and forge our own destiny. I choose to move forward with cautious hope, knowing that the road ahead is filled with challenges, yet also with the promise of redemption. Every day, I strive to make sure that justice, in its most uncompromising form, prevails over the lies of the past. This is my story, a story of betrayal, of a daughter blamed for a tragedy she never caused, and of a life defined by the relentless pursuit of truth. I have turned my grief into a weapon against injustice and transformed my pain into a beacon for others. I will forever remember the lessons learned from a family torn apart by deceit, and I will continue to fight for a future where no one is forced to bear the burden of unfounded guilt. The path I have chosen is not an easy one, but it is mine, and I walk it with unwavering resolve. In sharing every detail of this journey, I hope that those who have suffered similar betrayals might find in my words a spark of hope, a reminder that no matter how deep the wounds, the human spirit has the power to heal, to rebuild, and to stand against the forces of corruption. I have learned that revenge is not simply about retribution. It is about reclaiming your identity, your dignity, and your future from those who would steal it away through lies and manipulation. Now, as I continue to write new chapters in my life, I do so with the knowledge that the truth will always be my guide. I choose to face every new challenge with the same determination that carried me through the darkest days of my past. I remain vigilant, unyielding, and resolute in my mission to ensure that justice is served, not only for me, but for all who have been wronged. I will carry the memories of betrayal as a reminder of what must never be repeated, and I will honor those who suffered by dedicating my life to a cause greater than myself. This is the legacy I leave behind, a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a declaration that even the deepest wounds can forge the mightiest warriors, and a promise that the truth, no matter how long it is suppressed, will eventually prevail. I have chosen to rise above the past, to transform every scar into a symbol of resilience, and to ensure that the darkness of betrayal is met with an unrelenting light of truth and justice. My story is complete in every painful detail and every hard-won victory, a story of a daughter who refused to be defined by blame and a life that was reclaimed through the relentless pursuit of what is right. I share it with you in the hope that you, too, might find the courage to stand up against the forces that seek to diminish your light. I remain unrepentant, unyielding, and forever vigilant in my quest to honor the memory of those I loved and to ensure that the legacy of betrayal is met with a response as unforgiving as the wounds it inflicted.